party hat. Glory, hallelujah. The devil is mad, but I am glad. Glory, hallelujah. Nobody lost that soul because we had.
A senior opposition member hints at disquiet while a former one touts an alliance. Could personal ambitions shape political compromise? Customers lose thousands of dollars in an alleged bank hack. Will this be a painful blow to faith in the banking sector? Thousands petition for a reset of CXC math. Is the credibility of the region's education body at risk? These are the big stories of the week that was that have become today's big issues. Well, good afternoon. I'm your presenter, Rory Butler, filling in today for your regular host, Shelton Daniel. And we start with our first issue of the day. Rumblings of disquiet in the opposition United Progressive Party arose this week as caretaker and defeated candidate in the All Saints West constituency, Lamin Newton, was accused of breaking ranks with the party on a key issue and then stopped short of committing himself to the party. Lamin diverted from the United Progressive Party's stance on the 4th UE campus, defending his right to disagree on the issue, and addressed rumours of his relationship with Prime Minister Gaston Brown, who he described as a close friend. He had this to say when asked about his future in the United Progressive Party, a party he joined in 2015.
You're no longer the caretaker for All Saints West. What would you do politically?
That is something I would have to pray about,
Okay.
and I would need God's guidance.
Have you contemplated it? Given all the rumors that have been
Yes.
circulated, I mean,
Yes.
I've even heard names. We won't call them now, but I'm sure you've heard the same names I've heard.
Yes, yes.
You know, if the party says, look, Lamin, thanks a lot, but, you know, next time, you must have contemplated it.
Yes, yes. Like I said, Darren, that I allow God to guide me. And if the party decides that they no longer want to run me on their ticket, that's so be it. You know, I'm quite okay with
You'll
that.
still be a part of the party?
That I can't say at this time, but I know that I love politics.
Well, meanwhile, the possibility was touted this week of the Democratic National Alliance, DNA, joining forces with the United Progressive Party and becoming a part of the Faithful Nationals group. Political leader of the United Progressive Party, Harold Lovell, who is coming off the back of 2 comprehensive election defeats, says it's about having the best chance in the next election.
In order to allow for a seamless and non-confrontational functional relationship, we had invited the DNA to be part of the Faithful Nationals, and that would have allowed all the opposition forces to sit together. Well, in their wisdom, they have chosen not to do that, and they would prefer us to have just bilateral talks, and that is not off the table. And I can tell you that we will do whatever it takes insofar as that issue is concerned in order to ensure that we get the strongest possible force in the next election.
Well, political leader of the DNA, Joanne Messiah, who formed that party after a leadership race fallout with Lovell, also expressed her willingness to talk.
So that whenever the political leader or the leadership of the UPP is ready to engage in bilateral discussions with the DNE, we are open to such discussions. So yes, the ball is in his court, as he has acknowledged, and so we simply await further word from the UPP.
So the prospect of a shake-up in the opposition landscape, could personal ambitions shape political compromise? And what will it mean for not only the opposition's chances, but its identity? Joining us to discuss this and more, we have with us today Senior Lecturer and Head of the Department of Political Science at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine, Dr. Bishnu Raghunath. Good afternoon. Dr. Raghunath?
Good afternoon.
Also with us today is Professor of African and Caribbean Studies at Arizona State University, Dr. David Hines. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We have local commentator and master's student in international public policy, Colin Knight. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And finally with us today is political analyst Peter Wickham. Good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon.
Well, Dr. Raghunath, let's start with you. Granted, the source of disagreement in this instance may not be as severe as some have suggested, but let's just start with that issue of an opposition member breaking ranks. How much room should there be for senior party members to publicly express their disagreement on positions that a party takes on key issues?
Well, so what is that? Parties, members of the government, members of the opposition, tend to break rank from time to time. And it depends on the whip, and depends on the issues, and depends on the government itself giving the members, the party itself giving the members that opportunity. So, for instance, if they should remove the whip, if they should tell the members that they could speak on conscience, those are issues in which we find members breaking with the party and speaking against the party. However, it all depends upon what is the issue, and to what extent the party has accepted or adopted a position or a policy. If I am hearing right, in the particular instance here, the break is not necessarily with regard to the whip, but rather the member going on his own and simply saying, I am saying this notwithstanding what the party would have said, and the party did not give any leeway to speak on conscience. So in that context, this is a break that we are seeing from the party. It is not unusual within the Caribbean. It's a common practice in the Caribbean. And people leverage themselves based on where they want to take their own political careers and where they see their politics going.
Well, Dr. Hines, let me come to you, because Lamin Newton only joined the opposition party in 2015. And now at a time when there's much talk of his personal friendship with the Prime Minister, he stopped short of committing to the party if he doesn't retain his caretaker or candidacy position. Should unconditional allegiance to the party be expected of someone wishing to represent the party in a general election?
No. I think our political culture would be enhanced if party members are given more freedom to come out on issues on which they may disagree with the political party. I think for too long in the Caribbean, we have demanded unconditional loyalty from party members, and in a sense, what that does is that it stands in the way of a free flow of discussion, concourse of ideas. I think a political party that allows some latitude for its members to disagree on issues within the context of the context of party solidarity. That is, disagreeing within the context of the party not wanting to throw the party out of office, but disagreeing on on individual issues. I think that will change the political culture, and it would bring a lot of people who do not necessarily conform to this whole party loyalty into politics. If they know, look, I can belong to my party, I can agree on the general parameters of the party's platform, but I can disagree on individual issues without the fear that I'll be kicked out of the party.
But Dr. Hines, I understand your point there in regards to disagreeing on positions, but what I wanted to ask you there as well is when he was asked if he would continue to be a member of the party if he was not selected to be caretaker or candidate again. And he didn't give a definitive yes. He said he would have to pray on it and he would have to think on it. If you are looking to represent this party in the general election, should you be expected to commit yourself to that party, disagreement or not, unconditionally, not dependent on what position you may hold in that party?
Yeah, no, and I see your point, and it is in that context that I was talking that a party member should be able to disagree without fear of being thrown out of the party, but also without other party members feeling that, look, this disagreement has to do with the fact that if I don't get my way, then I'm going to leave the party. That kind of opportunism is also part of our politics in the region. And it is something that is unhealthy. That is, you must be able to disagree with your members, with your fellow members in your party, but you should not hold that disagreement over the heads to say, look, if I don't have my way, then I'm going to leave the party. I noticed the member there joined in 2015, so he's relatively new to the party. And if he were to leave because of this disagreement with the party, then it sends a message that, look, this person is less concerned with the platform of the party, with the philosophy of the party, and is more concerned with which side is able to accommodate him or her.
Well, Colin, let me move to you now. Whether Lamar Newton stays or goes or jumps ship is hypothetical at this point. But we have seen persons move between parties here a few times. Do you think generally the political parties here attract members through their deep philosophical standings and differences, or are political parties here just tools for personal advancement?
Well, it could be seen that way if you have a very cynical view of politics, that people are attracted to politics for their own personal advancement. I think there's a bit of that. I also think that there are individuals in the country who believe in a political party because of the principles and laws it stands for. And so it really is difficult to say one way or the other. I think political parties attract multiple types of personalities. And whether or not this is grandstanding on behalf of Lamar Newton, or whistleblowing, dog whistling rather, to the Prime Minister to say, listen, I'm ready to come over, is left to be seen. But I do think that this has a definite reputational issue for the United Progressive Party that they have to address.
How do you think they should address that?
Well, I think it's very important to understand why I somewhat agree with Professor Hines that there should be internal dissent, there should be debate. I also think that political parties are not tea parties. There has to be some party discipline when it comes to things like interviews, things like public appearances. There has to be some internal party rules. I don't think that you're allowed to just call from a member of the media and do an interview without being sanctioned by a political party. If you're going to be part of a political party, you have to be willing to play along with others and to work in the party's interest at the end of the day, because presumably the party's interest that is getting into government is also your interest. And if you're going to say something or do something that's going to undermine the party's interest, then it only serves to defeat your own political and personal interest. So there has to be some discipline in the party in that regard, and it has to address the issues as to why people feel that they have to do these kinds of things. Is the party giving enough room for members who express dissenting views before they go on to interviews? Is there debate and so forth happening in the party? All these are issues that I think have to be ventilated.
Peter, I want to get your take on the Lamar Newton issue, but I also want to move into the situation with the DNA. The DNA was formed at least in part by disaffected UPP members. So I want to get your take. How much strength, if any, could the UPP gain through this talk of an alliance or even a potential merger of the DNA?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's really the major issue here. I mean, if I just step back a bit, I think Newton's situation is one of, it's all about context, and I agree with the gentleman that, political parties have to be tense, they have to be able to accommodate different views and opinions, but we also have to be realistic. The UPP right now is on its back. It's been beaten badly twice, once coming out of government, and then subsequently, on each occasion, it has done worse than the time before. The second occasion, it has done worse than the first time. The leader has been unable to secure a seat, and it's a party in a situation that's quite dire. In that kind of environment, as much as we would say it would be great to have political parties reflecting this divergence, a person who's a senior member cannot realistically be going in that direction. I mean, if you really care about building the institution, there has to be a greater commitment to some central platform. I agree with Newton entirely regarding the Antigua campus. And I think it's a good principle that, he's standing on. But the reality of the situation is that if it is inconsistent with the party's position and the party is taking a position to the contrary, he really has to ask himself if he's helping the organization by behaving in this way. But then we come now to the whole question of the DNA going forward. I have expressed the view from the beginning that the loss of Joanne Messiah from the UPP was unfortunate. I think that she was a critical member. Clearly, she held the strongest seat because it was a seat which was able to withstand the swing in the last election. And I think that the sooner they get her back on board, the better. The lady is not without political talent, and I think that she was treated badly, quite frankly, and there's a feeling that, she was removed to make way for Mr. Harold Lovell. But there can be disagreement about that. But if it is that there is some kind of an agreement, a meeting of minds between herself and Mr. Lovell that would allow her to re-enter, even though the DNA in its current situation doesn't have even 2% support nationally, I think it would be an extremely good thing for them to have on board. The UPP has to build, and I think the sooner that they can get all possible opposition forces on board, firing on one cylinder, is important. Dr. Raghunath can speak to the Trinidad and Tobago situation where the PNM has historically exploited a fractured opposition reality. And, this is the same kind of thing that's going on here. So the only person that will benefit from this is the Antigua Labour Party. And I think that it is in the UPP's interest to pull the DNA on board and to get people like Newton to stop this foolishness about, you're developing independent thought and whatnot. I like it. Yeah, it's good. But at the same time, we've got to be realistic. Politics means building some semblance of unity, and this is not helping.
Well, Dr. Raghunath, Peter says it would make sense for the DNA and the UPP to work on that alliance or even merger. But we're talking about disquiet in the opposition party here. And, arguably it is hard enough to keep ambitious members satisfied while in opposition. Throw in that the prospect of an alliance or reconciliation with an offshoot of the opposition party. How much more complicated does that then make keeping those members satisfied?
It's always very complicated to keep members satisfied. Especially when they are in opposition, they have very little that they could do to win over people. I mean, they have no resources of the state, nothing like that, to win over supporters. And in that context, they try whatever they can to do that would impact upon their constituents and the people who they look at as possible voters for them. So it is always difficult for a member in opposition. A member in government, depending on if there's disquiet, well, then he could be cut off. But once in opposition, you don't even have anything to be cut off from. And that is where the real challenge comes in as to how do you mobilize support when you don't have that other backing of state resources. You never had it, and now it's going to be even worse because within your own party, whatever resources that are going to be given may very well leave you standing alone. So that is going to be something that party members, particularly some people who are looking at candidacy in elections, would have to look at and see how they can find that delicate balance.
Well, Dr. Hines, let me come to you. The UPP is, evidently at a low point after two pretty resounding election defeats. And while Harold Lovell did retain his leadership of the party in the party convention in February, some potential disquiet, apparently remains in the party. Do you think it's just desperation that's driving this talk of reconciliation with the DNA?
Well, it's party desperation, obviously. Look, the UPP, like most of the modern political parties in the Caribbean, is really a coalition of forces. We tend to forget that. It's not one of those cohesive parties like the Labour Party, which has been around for a very long time and has developed a kind of single identity. The UPP is really a plural party. ACLM and some of the other forces that came together and formed that party just the other day. And so, therefore, because it is not that kind of cohesive party, I think it has to find that balance between party discipline and the plural views of its members. And that is why I think, rather than alienating the gentleman for taking a different view on the university issue, I think the party has to be very open in saying, look, this member has a right to have a different view on this issue, but we would do everything to work to ensure that he does not feel alienated from the larger party. And it is in that context that I think Ms. Messiah coming back on board would give the party a list, would also symbolically say to the society that the opposition forces are united. Whenever you're in opposition and you're trying to get back in government and you are fractured, that's bad news. And so, therefore, you want to have a show of unity. And Ms. Messiah is a modern type of politician. She's very charismatic. She's a woman, and certainly someone with leadership potential. And coming back on board, although our party represents 2%, I think symbolically it will say to the Antiguan Barbudan electorate that the opposition is ready and united, and to go back to the founding principles of the UPP, which is based on a plurality of ideas.
Well, I don't know if I could speak out of turn very briefly, because I think part of the issue we have to address here is what exactly does Lamin bring to the table. I mean, my sense is that he's not John Messiah. He doesn't have a history of association in politics. He is not, one could say, a political bigwig. And the extent to which someone who doesn't have the gravitas of a John Messiah is in a position to say, I want parties to accommodate my views. There's a question that I think that we need to ask ourselves seriously, because if he doesn't have that gravitas, if he is not seen as being one of the political bigwigs, my question is, where does he get this position from that he is able to exert his influence? The party has to come around to me and not me to the party.
So do you think then it was a mistake for Howard Lovell and the UPP to bring in all these fresh faces and give them a chance of running for elected office in the last election? And now they're kind of dealing with the consequences of that rather than maybe going for more experienced members who have a longer history in the party?
Not at all. Not at all. I'm just saying that in terms of context, when a person is more experienced, when a person is a Gillian Lucky, when a person is a Joanne Messiah, that person can exert more influence over shaping the policy of a party. When you just come into an organization, and I think that party should bring in young people, so that was an excellent idea. But those people coming in have to understand that there's a process by which they have to conform a little bit more initially, and then later there will be an opportunity for them to say, look, I'm going to start to back fours and sixes and I'm going to express my views. So that's all I'm saying. I think that the time will come when Lamin could be in a position to dictate policy, but I don't believe that time has come yet.
But we'll call on.
If I may speak on the turn, Rory, because I think, yes, I think Peter's raised the essential point there, which is that you want to bring in new people, you want to look to the future. And as you look to the future, party discipline is not something that the present generation is going to conform to. So you have to find a balance between what Peter is talking about, the old style party discipline, and accommodating the new people who are coming on board, who are less wedded to dogmatism. So my point is that you have to find a balance. It's not all party discipline, it's not all freestyle, but we have to find a balance, and we have to future. That is what I think. Yes, he does not have the gravitas, but he represents the future.
Okay, I want to move to the call on. I mean, we're discussing the prospect of a lot of change in the United Progressive Party and in the opposition landscape. And as Dr. Hines pointed out, the UPP formed from a coalition. There's been a lot of change and refreshing of members over the years. My question to you is that, as an outside observer, can you actually see any distinct identity of what the UPP is, what it stands for, what its kind of unique selling point is?
But I think this is the question that people has to be answered by the UPP. The UPP has to find a sort of way to resolve its, what I consider to be its existential crisis. I think that the election of Gaston Brown has really unsettled the United Progressive Party, and they have not found a way to respond to his style of leadership, to his manner of governance. It seems to be quite dominant, and they have, I mean when you were talking about Mr. Bird, for instance, Sylvester Bird, you knew what your platform was, right? So there was sort of an anti-Bird platform. Now you have a different, more charismatic, more engaging leader. The United Progressive Party is a bit unsettled by that. If I could just go back, however, to the question of the future and the young Turk, I think that there's a definite divisional issue in the United Progressive Party. So you have the older generation, sort of established persons within the party, and you have all these new, fresh faces, and you're seeing some generational clashes, I think, in the United Progressive Party. Now, I think what Lamin Newton is bringing to the table is the ability to connect with people. I wouldn't dismiss that, because in the last election, for the first time, Lamin Newton performed very well in his constituency. He lost. The margin of victory by which he lost was not as bad as, say, Harold Level, who actually performed worse in his constituency than the previous year in 2014. Right? He has been in that constituency since 1980 something. So Lamin Newton has a likability about him, a popularity that when he speaks, people listen. He has a friendliness and an approachability that I think the United Progressive Party can still afford to lose. One of the biggest concerns about the United Progressive Party is that they are not able to connect with people. They're not able to get people to come out and vote. I'm not as well finding a lot of the people you saw, the so-called established populace, the big wigs, didn't stand. And you might want to question why that is. Why didn't John Underwood just arrive at the line table? All of these intellectual bright sparks who are carrying the party not stand. It is the Lamin Newtons and the Gregory Atkins and the new people that they brought in, the ones who are the electorate. I think if you can't face the electorate, and you really ought not to have that much gravitas in politics. The true test is whether you can face the electorate or not.
Dr. Raghunath, I want to get your take on that, and also, how important is it just that, how much of a political party is just about having those right personalities that can go and stand up for an election, versus maybe something deeper that the party subscribes to, and that the personalities are, of secondary importance?
Okay, we have to understand party politics in the Caribbean too, and party politics in the Caribbean, so the party to be overwhelming and the dominant issue. The people within the party and the members who the party will screen to come to the election, those seem secondary. For instance, in Trinidad and Tobago, we have heard it from the 1950s and 1960s when Eric Williams had put a crapo in a ballot, he would win a seat. So it is not necessarily the candidate, but rather it is the party. And people still go on with parties. Now, we have seen that context where in more recent times, people have now been starting talking about, well, why can't we look at what is the possibility of having a good candidate, a candidate who could represent you? And that is something that I think we saw in Trinidad again. In Trinidad, when we looked at the case where Jack Warner resigned from the UNC and contested a seat as an independent, well, not as an independent, but rather started to launch a new party, contested the same seat and won that seat simply because people saw him as a good representative. But that was only for that election. Come to other elections, people went back to party loyalty rather than personality, rather than the candidate, rather than the representation that they would get from a particular candidate. And that is the balance that is very difficult to find within the Caribbean when people are looking now and see who are our representatives. Are they representing us? Are they representing the party? And many a time people find themselves candidates who would have taken or adopted certain policies, certain positions, not necessarily in accordance with the party policy. Once they find themselves in the campaign, once they find themselves elected, party politics overwhelmed, literally, everything else. In the case of Antigua, I don't think it's anything different. Party politics will stand out. And of course, we talk about a young party, a new party, and in fact, a relatively new candidate coming on the scene. But the point about it is still party dominant as opposed to candidate presence.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break there, and then Peter, I want to ask you a quick question. I know you have to leave out early. I want to ask you a quick question before you go.
Yeah, sure.
Surfer Radio, 91.1 FM.
Does your car make a squealing noise and or your brake pedal vibrate when you apply your brakes? Like brake pads, brake rotors don't last forever. Rotors wear and can also become warped. Your brakes are one of the most important features on your car. At Kendall Auto Care Machine Shop, we can reservice your brake rotors without removing them from your car, saving you time and money. Visit us for a free inspection today. Call Kendall Auto Care at 562-1362 or visit us at the Factory Road branch.
Bachelor number 3, what's your idea of a perfect date?
Well, I can't think of anything better than holding your hand and taking a long romantic stroll through the aisles of North Coast Hardware, just spending quality time and saving lots of money.
Fall in love with the prices. Get swept off your feet by the quality. We're committed to bringing more value for the year of savings. North Coast Hardware, Blue Waters Main Road. Call 734-2222.
Back and Peter, let me get straight back to you then. You know, we're discussing this issue of disquiet in the opposition, but I want to ask you a big picture question here. How much of a mountain does the United Progressive Party have to climb? They're evidently at a low point, and how far are they up that mountain, or are they even going up at this point?
Yeah, I mean that's a critical point. I think it's a three-term mountain that they're looking to climb. And when I look at parties that have suffered what they have suffered, I compare the Democratic Labour Party coming out of 1994, in Trinidad and Tobago, you've had similar situations, and then generally speaking, it seems like it takes 3 years to recover. And my sense was that based on not this last election, but the one before that, the UPP was essentially rebuilding over 3 terms. Now, this last election was a setback to carry them back even further. So in a situation where in Antigua, and I've always argued this, Antigua Labour Party is the dominant political organization, and anyone else who has been in office is essentially borrowing time. We think that the UPP deserves to borrow time for 2 terms and be able to demonstrate a break in the political history of Antigua. The problem is that we have now reverted. So the mountain is high, and I think the extent to which they will be able to get back in office in under 3 terms will depend a lot on the extent to which they can work on the unity, in which they can build that unified force. And then a quick point I just wanted to make. You know, we were talking about what makes a political party, the philosophical differences and so on. And I don't really get a sense that across the Caribbean, that is any huge philosophical difference between any political parties. It's a question of personality. In the case of Antigua, it appears as though the UPP has taken a position that they have no problem with income tax, while the ABLC has entrenched itself in a position that they're opposed to income tax. That to me is the limit of a philosophical difference between the two that we're seeing. So in that environment, I think what you have to do is work with your personalities and build your personalities over time. And my sense is that that will be the best way to make a difference. And the UPP really has to decide if it wants to get itself back into office in under 3 terms, how quickly it can mobilize all forces, build this tent, get John Messiah back on board, look at questions of new and exciting leadership, and be able to build the organization. But other than that, as I said, it's looking like 15 years in the wilderness.
Dr. Hines, Peter talks about personalities and the importance of personalities, but we've seen a downward spiral of the UPP, whether it's coincidental or not, under Harold Lovell's leadership. Okay, he didn't lead at the latter time under Baldwin Spencer, when they started to suffer that decline. But can we realistically expect them to rebound and take on the strength of the Antigua Labour Party under his continued leadership?
I think that the jury's out on that question. I agree with my colleague, I think it's Mr. Knight, who says that the difference here is Gaston Brown. I think what Gaston Brown has done is that he has rebranded the Antigua Labour Party. I agree with much of what Peter said, except that I don't think that the old Antigua Labour Party is persevered. What we have is a new Antigua Labour Party around the personality of Gaston Brown, who is a pragmatist, who is not wedded in any big ideology, because the age of ideology in the Caribbean is gone. And with the age of ideology, the exit of the age of ideology, there's also the exit of the political party as the binding phenomenon around which people organize. I think it's more the individual and the individual representation of the brand that is pushing Caribbean politics. We are really in the midst of a change in the politics. Unfortunately for the UPP, they have not been able to find that kind of personality who would connect to this population, which is not so deep on ideology. And so therefore, it is a personality that's able to connect. And in that regard, I think Joan Messiah is really a better candidate. It's a woman, and women tend in this age of change to appeal to a broader and the newer population. And like I said, she's charismatic in ways that Aaron Lovell is not charismatic. And so if the UPP is to catch up with the ALP, I think it has to find that charismatic leader who's going to be able to reach out, especially to the newer and younger members of the population who are not wedded to political party, who are not wedded to ideology, but are more wedded to the form of politics rather than substance of politics.
Dr. Raghunath, if not for a change in leadership, where can a party look for, what can it look to as hope to be able to rebound and take on a party as dominant as the Antigua Labour Party currently is? And can they really realistically be looking to say a possible alliance with the offshoot of the DNA, which, as Peter mentioned, only garnered about 2% of the vote in the last election?
Well, the thing about it is that I agree with Peter Wickham, who said that ideology, when you look at party philosophy within the region, there's hardly any difference between parties within the region. In Antigua, it's no different. All the parties seemingly have the same ideology, the same political philosophy. The question is, how are they going to get the leadership? Now, the Antigua Labour Party is long-standing. How do you unseat them? These similar questions have been raised, for instance, in Trinidad and in other places in the region. Do we need coalition? Do we need to move into coalition government, coalitions and accommodations amongst political parties in order that they get to that stage where the people will look at them and say, well, look, this is more of a nationalistic or a party which covers more of a mass-based party covering the entire country rather than simply a particular segment or their traditional support base. And that is the context in which I would like to think that the accommodations and coalitions will have to be built now. We can't look at ideology, we can't look at philosophy. Philosophy and ideology, as another commentator mentioned, is not something that the region still holds on to now. And we are looking at personalities, we are looking at people who are pragmatic and people who are looking at positive solutions to their problems. Not people who would keep on mentioning these are the problems, but rather looking at people who would make problems into issues where we could find solutions. And that, I think, is what the politics is going to, the parties are going to have to look at now and how they move forward in dealing with those sorts of challenges.
Carlon, given that we kind of have a history as mostly a two-party system here, do you think it is important for the UPP to recover somewhat as a strong opposition at least, or do you think that even if their downfall continues, that could create an opportunity for something else to arise?
Well, personally, as a level of democracy, it pains me to see Antigua and Barbuda slide into a one-party dominant state. But I think it's important to point out here the broader culture of the Caribbean. Caribbean politics is such that you have one party that tends to dominate for 4 or 5 terms in the stretch, and opposition parties who get a few periods to disrupt the trend, as Peter mentioned earlier. So in St. Vincent, we see Ralph Gonzalez, in Dominica, in St. Kitts, we had Dr. Douglas in there for quite some time. So this is not inconsistent with what we've come to see and expect of, and we believe that we have a two-time whitewash. So it is not inconsistent with what we see with one-party dominance. I think, however, the United Progressive Party has a specific problem, right? It has to be a predictable problem, and I think that one of the biggest issues is how a lot of white people in the United Party were able to articulate positions and articulate policy standards, but not able to get people to come out and support. And a lot to do with branding, connectability, and how they relate to people. Which is why I think people like Lam and Newton and others are very important, because they are the people who are able to go to such especially people on their side. But the second issue, and this is why I think it's very important, is leadership. I think it was a strategic mistake to the United Progressive Party to put Harold Lovell back as leader. I think Harold Lovell, with all due respect to him, I think he's been a great face in France in Barbuda. But I think his political shelf life has come to an end. And the United Progressive Party has to think of the future and get over its obstacles with Harold Lovell and the so-called intelligentsia of the party. It has to get a leader that's young, dynamic, and charismatic and can match Captain Brown. In the last election, what we saw was that Harold Lovell was walloped, flashed, badly, with dominant Captain Brown. And to push him there again, I don't understand that strategically. I don't know what may happen again. And so if this is going to be a 3-term business, I think this party that has to go and choose another leader at the end of this next election. It's not sensible. Which is why I think this is an opportunity by leaving, because this should have been really her time to come as the United Progressive Party. And I think if she comes back on board, the United Progressive Party has got to look at people like Joan Messiah and others, Richard Lewis and others, as the future of the party.
Peter, I'm not sure if you've had to leave us or if you're still with us.
Yeah. I'm still here. Yeah, I can go after this comment.
Sure. So let me just ask you here, because I mean, as much as we talk about leadership and we talk about identity in politics, we know that money matters. Under its current state, do you think the United Progressive Party has a chance of raising the sort of funds that would be necessary to put up a significant and serious challenge to the Antigua Labour Party in the next election?
I mean, they can in time. You know what? One of the things about fundraising is that it has a lot to do with the local appetite for change. I think in a situation where Antigua and Barbuda get tired of Gaston Brown and the ALP, forces within the private sector will identify the necessary resources to put someone in office. Do I think that time is now? I don't think so. I don't really get a sense that in Antigua and Barbuda there's this broad desire for change that would lead people to say, well, look, let's start to fund the opposition forces heavily in order to put them back in office. And in that regard, they have a problem. My sense is that the loyalties that would have held over from when they were in office, with people like Tim Level, who was Minister of Finance and so on, a lot of that has weared thin. My sense is that they are financially compromised. One of the good things that Winata did for the Democratic Labour Party in Barbados when he was in a similar situation as Gaston Brown was that he created a parliamentary vote that was about $250 million, which both political parties could share. So it meant that in a situation like the one you're in Antigua now, you basically have 2 opposition forces, so they would each get a third. They would each get a quarter, and then of course the Antigua Labour Party would get half. Sorry, it would get a third, 33 and a third percent, right? Divided 3 ways. That kind of initiative, I think, could help build the resources of opposition parties, and I think that type of thing would be good. I don't get a sense that the Antigua Labour Party will do it, but certainly some kind of a funding initiative that allows opposition parties to play their role, because we appreciate that if they don't have contributions from the parliamentary group, and then they can't raise money in the private sector, money is about everything. Basically, everything is about money. So they're not going to be in a position to put up the kind of fight that the Antigua Labour Party clearly outspent them in the last election. And then again, that's a reflection of the fact can't remember which of the other panelists, but I certainly want to agree that I think that Joanne Masson has been an excellent choice of leadership. I've always been one of her great fans. I think that the fact that she presents as a woman, the fact that she seems to be exciting, and I mean, certainly she ran in a seat that if she had been there, she would be the leader of the opposition. To me, she was treated unfairly because she was an opposition member who retained the seat in a situation where the opposition, the leader of the party, did not, and yet still she couldn't find herself defending that seat. So I think she would be a superior choice to the person that's currently there. I don't have a problem with Mr. Level, but I agree with the other panelists that his shelf life is expired, and the party needs to look towards new and exciting. Unless they have someone else waiting in wings that is more exciting than Joanne Messiah, then she would be my pick for the leadership of the party, which of course raises the question of Pringle, what happens to him. If she goes back, if I were her, I would want to go back in that seat. So the discussion is an interesting and fascinating one, and we have to see certainly where it goes.
Okay, well,
and I want to thank you for participating because I have to run.
Thank you, Peter. Well, we are coming to a close here anyway.
Sure, okay.
Dr. Raganoff, let me ask you, how much of a role does the moneyed class play in elections, in determining the result of elections? And how difficult does it get to raise funds as an opposition the longer you spend in opposition?
The longer you stay in opposition, it's more difficult to raise funds because by which time the ruling party would have manipulated and mobilized the support of most of the business community and probably even giving them options and prospects where they could become, where under their tenure they could earn more revenues and so forth. So that becomes a challenge. The question, however, money is always an issue. Whether the population, however, will want to see that and to put money into a campaign where they would see a party as coming to the fore. Now, the Antigua Labour Party is there institutionalized. It is something that the people of Antigua, Barbuda is going to have to look at carefully and see whether or not they are willing to put their funds behind another party which they're not sure is going to unseat the Antigua Labour Party. And that's the real challenge. So, from all intents and purposes, I would think that money is going to be a major problem for the other parties that are going to be challenging the ALP at this point in time. And whether they could raise that revenue to fund a campaign, we'll have to wait and see.
Dr. Hines, I put the same question to you.
Yes, I think money becomes important, and if you are down in the dumps as the UPP is, it becomes very difficult to raise money because people put money behind winners, and the UPP has to show that it could compete and win. I am not as pessimistic as Peter is as far as the UPP's chance at the next election. I think that if Joanne Messiah comes back into the fold and plays an important role, if she becomes the leader, I think it would excite the young population. I think you win elections in the Caribbean based on the new voters that are coming in. Because those who are here already have picked sides. And it is the new voters, those, 18 to 22, 23 young voters that you've got to appeal to. And I think being in the opposition gives you an advantage when you speak to those younger voters because they are thinking about the future and they are already critiquing those who are in power. And so therefore, if you have a candidate or candidates who can appeal to them, I think the UPP can compete at the next election. Change in leadership, direct your appeal to younger voters, and I think they can become very, very competitive. Yes, we have some governments across the region that have remained in office for a little bit, but there are several governments that came in, spent 1 term, 2 terms in Jamaica. The JLP came in on the Golden, spent 1 term. The PNP got in back, spent 1 term. We have all next there. In St. Lucia, we have had that kind of exchange. So there is also the exchange going on in parts of the region. And if the UPP upgrades its image picks the right kind of leader, then I think it can compete at the next election.
Well, we are just about out of time there, but Colin, you have the last word.
Yeah, so I agree with the change of leadership strategy. And I think the United Progressive Party has got to put its own, the elite in the party have got to put their own personal issues with Joan Messiah aside and look at what is in the best interest of the party. I mean, I think the issue is reintegrating Joan Messiah into the party is that there are people within the party who are dead opposed to Joan Messiah leading the party. But the question is, if this is the best thing for the United Progressive Party going into the next election, will they be willing to do it? That's the question.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and I have to say thank you to Senior Lecturer and Head of the Department of Political Science at UW St. Augustine, Dr. Vishnu Raghunath, Professor of African and Caribbean Studies at Arizona State University, Dr. David Hines, and local commentator and master's student in international public policy, Colin Knight, as well as political analyst Peter Wickham. Thank you to all of you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready for the event of the year? Fashion-tastic 2019, The Takeover, Sunday, 26th May, Portsmouth Hotel. Local and regional designers vie for the title. Designers from Montserrat and Antigua Barbuda. This is it. The red carpet interview starts at 4 p.m. sharp. With entertainment by the Strains, while the fashion competition starts right on time at 6 p.m. All-inclusive tickets can be purchased at Pink Mountains, Sea Closet, House of Pink, and the ticketing app for $150. More at the gate. Brought to you by our platinum sponsor, Santa Fe, Antigua Commercial Bank. Fashion-tastic 2019, The Takeover.
The United Nations General Assembly, along with the governments of Antigua and Barbuda and Norway, presents Play It Out to Phase It Out, the international Stadium. Doors open at 4 p.m. and admission is absolutely free. Don't miss the biggest concert ever to be hosted in Antigua. Be a part of this great initiative and let us play it out to phase it out. Let us beat plastic pollution.
This is Observer Radio.
Well, the precise scale of the problem remains unclear, but scores of customers at the Antigua Commercial Bank this week complained of thousands of dollars going missing from their accounts. Accounts were allegedly hacked, and customers reported seeing purchases on their bank statements which they know nothing about. ACB's Marketing and Public Relations Manager, Shantia Edwards, says there were no glitches in the systems at the financial institution.
With the advent of electronic payment services, there are a number of fraudsters who dedicate their time to finding creative ways to defraud customers of their funds. Please know that Antigua Commercial Bank has put mechanisms in place to ensure the safety of our customers' accounts and remind customers who utilize internet and mobile banking platforms to regularly review their account activities for any signs of inconsistent activity. We urge all customers to contact the bank immediately should they observe a transaction they did not initiate, as we work together to better protect you.
Edwards says the bank did receive an increase in such reports and is working feverishly to investigate them. One customer reported almost $4,000 in fraudulent transactions between the 17th and the 23rd of May, with progressively larger transactions, initially from around just $5 to almost $1,000 at places or merchants like Coca-Cola City and Macy's. So what recourse do customers have? How can they protect themselves? And how could such breaches impact faith in the banking system? Well, joining us to discuss this and more, we have with us today economist and former banker Everett Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. And correction, I'm not an economist. Management and financial consultant.
Management and financial consultant, and a former banker. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Apologize for that. Also with us today is Executive Director of the Equigov Institute, a consultancy and training firm focused on areas such as data privacy, transparency, governance, and whistleblowing. Rishi Maharaj. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We have with us today as well Information Systems Security Consultant and owner and founder of the Oak Shield IT Security, Omari King. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, boy.
And finally, we have with us today Cybersecurity expert Dellan Morgan, who is currently undertaking his PhD in cybersecurity at the University of West London. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Well, Rishi, let's start with you. Understandably, banks are not too keen on disclosing too much about such incidents. But how much do they need to tell the public, and how much do they need to tell their customers?
Well, yeah, I think this has to come from the level of trust, in that normal citizens will put their trust in the banking institution to hold their money securely, and that they're able to have access to the money, and that proper systems, either through technology or otherwise, are used to be able to protect that money from any outside intrusion. And if there was a breach in that trust, in terms of there was a hack or a breach in some other form or fashion, then obviously the bank should take as quick steps as possible to alert those customers who are harmed, and also to put proper things in place to try to ascertain exactly what went wrong, how did it happen, and then what things can they put in place to ensure that it doesn't happen again. But something that banks are doing now, apparently, most financial institutions are apparently doing right now, is that they're reversing the burden and placing the burden now on the customers, and telling the customers, well, you have to ensure that your PIN and whatever instrument that you may have, regards to your credit cards or your ATM cards, that they are secured and that nobody has access to it, and nobody knows what your PIN numbers. But this then places reverse responsibility on citizens to be able to also ensure that they also place adequate protection in terms of the way they use their credit cards and the ATM cards, etc.
Well, Everett, Christian, this appears to be have affected quite a few customers at one particular bank. But how much could this and other such incidents affect faith in the banking sector, especially given that security for your money is one of the core things that you expect from a bank?
Okay, before I respond specifically to the question, let me just make a comment. What appears to have happened here is a skimming process where fraudsters use these skimmers which they attach to the ATM machines. And these skimmers are designed to steal all of the information on your magnetic stripe. So your name, your account number, and when you key in your PIN to try and access your cash, it also captures that information. So in that sense, it does not appear to be a breach of the bank's system per se. It's not that they've infiltrated the bank and the bank's core platform. It is rather capturing the information of clients using these skimmers and then making duplicate cards with that information, which they then use to access the funds, whether at the ATM or with a merchant. So I just wanted to put that up front. But yes, the issue of confidence comes into play, because as the previous commentator mentioned, when persons deposit their funds with banks, credit unions, any financial institution, they expect that it will be safe, much safer than doing what our foreparents used to do, which is to keep it under our mattresses. I think those days are long gone. So the issue which arises is whether or not those persons who have been impacted by this fraud, whether or not they will be refunded. At this point in time, I would think that they would be, because once they can establish that they did not give out their PIN number to anyone, or I'll give anyone their cards to use, once they can establish that, they should be reimbursed the amount. And I would expect that that will take place. And hopefully that will help to restore confidence in the institution.
Well, Dellan, let me come to you. We hear of hacks and breaches at some of the biggest organizations in the world these days. So, how often do such occurrences take place with people's accounts at a bank, and how much can be done to guard against it?
Well, this happens quite often. You'd find that it happen a lot in developing countries such as the Caribbean, some developing countries. What I would suggest in terms of a bank's point of view is the IT teams at the banks should have increased protection of customer data. They could adopt a few methods such as respond as if the network has already been breached. I mean, by adopting this mindset, forces of IT team will have to prioritize most businesses' critical parts of the network and use that as a strategy. When done correctly, this could be very, very crucial to protect the security of customers' data. I mean, by implementing enterprise-wide security policy as well, policies should be very, very important when it comes to internet banking or just banking regularly. A roadmap for any IT team should maintain a truly adaptive security architecture. This will help them protect their bank system in the best way to operate in a mindset of minimal risk. But there are also a few things that customers could do to help protect themselves, such as multi-factor authentication. I mean, by using a combination of methods to secure their information is very important. They could phone their bank just to make sure that any transaction that's been made has been made and no other transaction that they haven't made hasn't been made. Monitor transactions, that is an important thing. They want to monitor it regularly, possibly once a week if they haven't got internet banking, or if they've got internet banking, monitor their banking every day if possible. But also check their accounts by the ATM machine to make sure nothing's been taken out, because as you said, cards can be cloned and it can be used at the same time that their card is active. So it's very important. So there's a few strategies that could be deployed to help with the protection of the data of customers and banks.
Omari, let me get your take on how much responsibility lies with the bank versus the customer, and what can they each do to protect themselves in the future?
Well, the bank, I would say, I would share the greatest burden in terms of protecting the data. They will hold a lot of data from a lot of different clients, and financial data is particularly critical in terms of ensuring that it is properly secured. And we have to remember that these banks do not exist in a vacuum, and there are certain standards that they do have to meet, particularly with banks that do card payments, international cards, Visa, etc. There are certain standards that they would have to adhere to, minimal standards, in order to be able to do these sort of transactions, payment card and so on. The same would occur with online banking. And in terms of the customer, obviously the owners cannot fall completely on the bank itself. The customer definitely has a responsibility of protecting their own data, ensuring that it's not given away, essentially, not just stolen, because there are other ways and means by which persons can obtain information from persons' cards. Phishing emails, for example, when persons get emails asking them to click a certain link and give certain information, personal, private information that they should not be given out. These are things that the customer themselves have to be aware of, so that they're not giving away the data. The merchants as well would have a responsibility, because their systems, they may be storing information and their systems could be breached as well. So it's not just one party that will have to be aware of what's going on. Everybody needs to be fully aware and understand that they need to protect themselves. In terms of the banks themselves, I mentioned the standards that they will have to meet. Those will include simple things such as antivirus software, firewalls, ensuring that everything is up to date, ensuring that your systems are hardened, meaning that there aren't any software that don't need to be on there, because unnecessary software only increases your attack vector. There are more things, and the more software that is actually on the system, the more that there is to attack, because everything has a possible vulnerability that you can actually attack.
want you to continue there, but I want to ask you, like, specifically about ATMs, because you know, you've seen these things on TV, and so where the scammers come and they insert something into an ATM, and they, you know, they steal the information, as we were discussing. What security should the banks have as their responsibility to take care of their own ATMs? You know, like, I may not know as a customer that something has been installed on this ATM. So is it my responsibility to be able to look at an ATM and say, well, there's something that looks fishy about this? Or should the bank put something in place to ensure that ATMs cannot be tampered with?
The banks would definitely have to do that, to put something in place in terms of perhaps physical security, in terms of security guards, cameras, to make sure that nobody, because obviously somebody will have to physically go and install something. And with cameras in place, they should be picked up on camera. I think that would be the main way to get around that sort of thing. And that is very important, obviously, because the customer, as you rightly said, would not have any idea that these things, these skimmers, are actually connected to the machines, because it would be made in a way that they're not really detectable to somebody who's not totally familiar with the machine.
Rishi, let me come back to you. Thousands of dollars going missing from your account can obviously have quite a big impact for people, a lot of knock-on effects. You know, people have obligations, they have rent, they have all sorts of obligations they need to take care of. And that may be all that they had in their account, right? So what recourse can customers expect? And how important is that for that recourse to be timely? And what is timely?
Yeah, I mean, and that's something, it's always a difficulty, especially with banks. When banks, I'm not saying particularly this bank, but in most instances, banks would like to take the responsibility of them and place it on the customer, and because of that, it then becomes a lengthy process for the customer to prove that the transaction was not theirs or was not authorized by them. So obviously, the banks and most banks now have proper policies and procedures in place to be able to deal with situations like this, because once you now live or exist in an electronic environment, then at the end of the day, these things are going to happen. So most banking institutions would now have systems in place to be able to deal with when these situations occur, to verify with customers, to contact customers as quickly as possible. And then there obviously needs to be people that probably would need to fill out, and then you may also have insurance claims that may impact on the bank. So I think most bank institutions would have systems in place, but it must be done in a timely manner, because as you mentioned, some customers or some individuals, the 4,000 or 5,000 that they have in their bank account may be what is all that is remaining until they get paid the following month, and they have other duties to deal with that money, rent, utilities, food, etc. So obviously these things need to be done in a timely manner, and banks should have proper systems, processes, point of contact individuals that customers could connect to be able to start the process to get back their money as quickly as possible.
I mean, so you hear mention of things like 90 business days and so on. What do you consider timely?
For me, timely would be it's open to interpretation. But for me, timely would be as quickly as possible, probably within a month's time frame. But obviously, the banks will also have to do their own internal investigation to ensure that the claims that are being made are factual, and that there definitely was illegal tampering with the individual's account, either internally through their systems or externally through an ATM or through a skimming mechanism or through a merchant where the person may have used their card and stuff like that. So obviously, for the banks, timely may take a longer time, or maybe 90 days or so, but obviously there needs to be communication between the banks and the customers. Because like I said, we're dealing here with a level of trust, that you trust putting your money in this institution, that it will be secured, that you have access to it, but also if something happens, that you have remedies as quickly as possible. So the banks also, from a trust factor, would want to ensure that from a customer client care point of view, that they treat with you that you are a number one priority, regardless of if you have $5, $1,000, or $1 million in your account. You are their prime priority at the time in dealing with this. And in order to maintain your trust as much as possible, so that if this is rectified, you will continue to want to do business with them in the future.
Mr. Christian, was wondering if you could talk me through what happens to the money. So, the funds have been stolen. These skimmer machines are being used. We've seen it on some of the accounts where they say it's Coca-Cola City or Macy's or so where this money has come out. I don't know if that means that they've purchased products at these stores.
Most likely.
So the money's gone somewhere. So what happens to that money? Can it be recovered? And what agencies will get involved in this process?
To answer the last question, the agencies that will be involved would be the police, because once you can establish that some fraud has taken place, you'd obviously want to notify the police and get them involved as soon as
Locally,
possible.
or
It has to start locally. And then the local police can enlist the assistance of other countries, other agencies, depending on where the fraud may have originated. Because, for instance, they may skim the cards here in Antigua, but they use them, say, in New York. You need to then involve the authorities in New York as well. But Omari had mentioned the fact that, it has to be the responsibility of different parties, not just one party, to ensure the security, because security is the key to this whole thing. And he said correctly, and I agree with him, that the average customer would not be able to tell whether a machine has been tampered with and a skimming device has been installed. I understand, and I'm saying specifically I understand, because that area is not an area of specialty for me. So I'm gonna tread very carefully here and leave it to the experts to deal with it. We understand that there are some telltale signs that a customer could look for to alert them as to the possibility that there may be a skimmer or a camera attached to the ATM which may be attempting to harvest their information. So what I think should happen is that the Bankers Association, and I'm saying the Bankers Association because I think this is something that should involve and be of concern to all of the banks and not just an individual bank, that the association should engage in a PR campaign to inform customers what it is that you should look for. For instance, if you go to an ATM machine and you key in your PIN and you recognize that you can't access your funds, is that a sign that something is wrong? Or could it be that maybe just that your card has been exposed to a magnetic field or whatever have you? These are things that information could be shared with customers. Sometimes I understand that in inserting the skimmers, the crooks have to screw out certain things, and so the card slot where you insert your card may not be as secure, it may shake. That's something else that people may want to look out for. Again, as I said, I'm not an expert in that, but I know the banks do have their IT people who should be able to develop a handbook or whatever you want to call it, maybe just some main points that could be published to tell the customers what it is to look out for. It may not necessarily be that something is wrong, but then it's better safe than sorry. At least if you know you're looking for something, you see something that appears untoward, you report it.
Can customers expect any sort of reprieve from those that, you're an effective customer, whether individually or your business, and you have debts due, you have your mortgage, you have all sorts of things that you have to pay. Can you expect any sort of reprieve from those? Maybe a letter from the bank explaining the situation that might give you some sort of leeway?
Not likely.
Not likely.
Not likely. So you just have to pray that the matter is settled expeditiously.
Well, Dellan, let me come back to you. A lot of finance is moving online these days. So what are the most vulnerable points that we need to look out for and institutions need to be aware of?
Well, when it comes to online banking, there's various methods to provide safe banking experience for our customers. I would say antivirus and malware protection. These programs help detect and prevent viruses. and malicious software. Banks should use up-to-date programs to weed out malware to prevent viruses from spreading. Also, firewalls screen data from coming in and out of the computer networks, which also block unauthorized access and stopping traffic from unsafe internet sources. So customers should be aware of this as well as cookies, such things as cookies. By placing a cookie on a computer web browser on a customer's computer after their initial login, banks can then recognize and authenticate your computer when you log into the account again. So if you use your computer to log into your account, you should erase all your cookies and make sure all required information is stored at the next time of the login. Also, again, multi-factor authentication methods. It could use the form of many different factors such as pins, just passwords, just to make it more secure. Again, credential confidentiality. Banks don't share the usernames or passwords with anyone, so neither should customers. Automatic logout as well. Make sure that online that the banking institute that you're with, that automatically logs you out after a set period of time. And yeah, those are some methods that I would say that if a customer is online, they should look out for and to adopt to their online banking procedure.
Omari, we're arguably quite far behind compared to much of the developed world when it comes to e-commerce here, and you often hear calls for saying that we need to move quickly into that kind of arena. But do incidents such as this give good reason why we should be cautious and take our time and adopting e-commerce too fully in Antigua?
No, I don't agree with that. I think that we need to move ahead in terms of, I won't say necessarily catching up with the developed world, but I think many persons are already engaged in e-commerce in one form or the other. Many persons use credit cards online and when they travel. And I think what needs to catch up is our security and to ensure that when we actually do get to that point where we can say that we are maybe on par with the developed world, that the security is not left behind. Right? We mentioned some methods in which the bank can secure themselves. Those are very important. As I mentioned before, there are certain standards that they would have to adhere to before things happen. But banks can always go above and beyond that call of duty in terms of making sure that their customers are protected, because customers have options, and if your bank is not providing the requirements that somebody actually wants, they can always go to another place. And so I would definitely think that bring the security up to speed, and piggybacking off something that Mr. Christian said in terms of the PR campaign by the bank, I think it's extremely important for everybody to have some sort of security awareness training, to be able to recognize not only in terms of the ATM, but how to behave online, in terms of maybe putting their information online, what kind of information they should share online, what signs to look for in terms of websites, in terms of emails that you may receive asking you for information, what to look for to be safe. And that is very, very important for, I think, anybody who is going to be using the internet for any kind of transaction.
Rishi, we often hear business people in Antigua talk about the fact that we're a cash society, or at least that's the opinion that you hear from business people quite often. That there's somewhat of a reluctance to adopt the use of cards too widespread, or this e-commerce. If we are as a society, as an economy, going to benefit or get the benefits of moving further towards e-commerce and pushing in that direction, what is required to give people the faith to move in that direction so that they can have the trust to adopt those changes?
Well, yeah, I think most countries in the developing world, especially in the Caribbean, are now moving towards providing more goods and services electronically, either through government or through merchants and stuff like that. And one thing that definitely needs to be put in place, if any country like Antigua is now looking towards moving to have more business transacted electronically, would be from a legislative point of view. For example, in Europe, in May of last year, they just implemented what is called General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, and that is a regulation that deals with the way that public sector organizations and private sector organizations treat with people's personal information and sensitive personal information. And that sets up certain parameters that organizations now have to adhere to with regard to collecting people's personal data, using it, sharing it, moving it from one jurisdiction to another jurisdiction. What systems you have in place to be able to, from a security point of view, whether you're using the cloud, whether you're using your own servers at your organization. So legislatively, I think one thing that needs to be put in place would be some form of privacy protection legislation that will give customers a level of trust and a level of accountability that they can hold organizations accountable to with regards to the personal information that all organizations, either public, private, be it banks, be it insurance companies, whoever it may be, the kind of personal data that they'll hold on them. And then secondly, there needs to be, I think as alluded to by several of the speakers, education, in terms of educating the public into how we now exist in this economic, in this cyberspace, with regards to how what kind of information we put online, what kind of information we share online. If we go to transact business online, shop, use our credit card to ensure that the site that we're going on to has security on it, it's HTTPS slogan on it, so you know it's encrypted. Look at phishing emails that may come to you either by email or by text, even by phone call, and be aware of these scams that may come about that may try as best as possible to elicit you to give out certain kind of information, whether it be your credit card information, your banking information, or other information that they could use besides your credit card number or your bank number. For example, most customers or most people can be defined by three main things that they use for security: your name, your date of birth, and your mother's maiden name. Are some of the basic security questions that most organizations ask. And if you willingly give out this information, then anybody can now use that to be able to recreate you in a fraudulent way and then be able to transact business on your behalf. So both legislatively and from an educational point of view, those are some of the things that I would recommend that needs to be put in place as we move towards transacting business in this cyberspace.
Mr. Christian, do you agree with the view that we're mostly a cash society? And if so, what do you think needs to happen both to ensure faith in the sector, but otherwise as well in terms of investments to move us further along in adopting more e-commerce and so on, Antique?
First, the issue of whether or not we are still a cash society. I'd say we are not predominantly a cash society any longer. And we have seen the change. There's a gradual shift to using cards and e-commerce otherwise. And this trend will continue. I don't see any option, honestly. I don't see anybody going back to cash. And as a result, the whole question of the security, which has been emphasized today, becomes critical. But I wish to take this discussion maybe a slightly different direction, still of the whole intrusion of security. Sure. Because if we look at, we had cases where I think it was in 2016, where someone broke into the Bangladesh Central Bank, and they were able to send swift messages to the New York Reserve Bank, where the Bangladesh Central Bank kept their account. And they were able to move hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, a lot of it was recovered, but they still lost something like 81 million US dollars. Now, when you can breach a central bank, where the security would be, in my view, higher or tighter than say a regular commercial bank, it tells you about the sophistication of the crooks. We had, I think it's in 2018, a similar attempt was made with the Malaysian Central Bank, but they were able to halt it before the funds actually got out. And then we had cases in a number of other countries where banks have lost funds, Russia, Mexico, and even recently you had a case in the US, I think it was in Louisiana, where people successfully broke into the systems and using the SWIFT money transfer system. So it's not even like in this case that we're dealing with locally, where it was a skimming machine that was used to capture people's data. They actually broke into the mainframe. Did I repeat that correctly? They got into the system, the bank's internal servers. So yeah,
into the servers, internal servers,
and was able to get access mine information that they then use to have these transactions being processed via SWIFT, and I say involving millions upon millions of dollars. So what it seems to me is that no matter how much security infrastructure we put in place, the crooks will find ways to locate vulnerabilities and to exploit them. So this is almost like a cat and mouse game. So the only thing I can conclude is that the internet and electronic banking has been both a blessing and a curse. Blessing from the point of view that the convenience, the speed, the efficiency is there, but then the risk is higher. And this is where I think the banks, and not just the commercial banks, but the central banks and even the merchants, would have to find ways to enhance their security, to keep them up to date at all times, in order to minimize the risk to the patrons.
Dellan, let me ask you, when we talk about incidents such as that, and it's like, some of the biggest institutions in the world facing breaches, right? Do we find ourselves in a situation that the further we try to progress, not just in e-commerce, but generally with, technology, the further we try to progress and benefit from that, is the more we kind of put ourselves out there as a target, where people think those who would seek to hack, to do harm, to commit these frauds will see, oh, these little developing countries are vulnerable, and they will go after and target us, seeing as having a lower defense than the rest of the world. Or is that not the reality? Is it that we can pursue these things and we can have the best defenses?
Yeah, I found out that it is definitely the case where people from developing countries will definitely have more sophisticated software or technology to attack that of developing countries. And the problem is that developing countries find themselves being vulnerable because of the lack of awareness and the lack of technology available to defend themselves against these attacks. The problem is that, throughout the world, technology is growing. New devices are appearing every day. New softwares are appearing every day. It's just about the ability to effectively deal with these attacks instantly, which is very hard. And as developing countries, it's definitely harder to keep up with these growing technologies that can potentially pose a risk to the country or the developing countries. What I would suggest is just to make sure that awareness is the most important thing. Education to people and banks and staff members is very important. Also, just keeping up to date with the latest attacks and trends that's going on with the world. Last year, January, hackers used the DDoS OS attack to cripple Lloyds Bank's group here in the UK. And for 2 days, it left many customers temporarily unavailable to use services such as checking their balance or sending payments. So these are problems that happen throughout the world, not just in developing countries. But you're right to say that developing countries are definitely more prone to these attacks. And I think with sufficient awareness and training, should be the best tools to help avoid these attacks.
Omari, what's your take on that issue?
Well, first thing I would say is that anything can be hacked. Mr. Christian spoke about blaming the internet, emergence of the internet and e-commerce and so on being both a blessing and a curse. Yeah, he's definitely right in the fact that, as I said, anything can be hacked given enough time. So what we actually aim for, we strive for, is something we call computational security, whereby we make it difficult enough to get in that it would take too long for somebody to be able to hack your system. Essentially, if I can use the analogy of your a house. If you have a house with no door, somebody can easily walk in. If you put a door on it, it will take them some more time to open the door and get in. If you put a lock on the door, then they have to break the lock and open the door and get in. And with all these extra features that you add, it will take longer for persons to get in. And then by the time they would be able to get in, you would have changed something within that whole security setup so that they would have to essentially start again. That is the whole idea of computational security. And I would also say that in terms of breaches, because I'm speaking about hacking there, but in terms of a breach, because when we talk about a breach, we're talking about the data of the organization being exfiltrated. A breach doesn't necessarily have to be the result of a hack or a malicious user or cook. It may be the result of error on the part of an employee, for example, that would have exposed certain data. Maybe a result of the way that the data is actually being stored. So there are many things. I think one of the other persons would mention it. There are many different things, layers of security that you actually need to have as part of your organization. And for me, the most important one would be awareness, education, making everybody aware that this is what they need to do. This is how they have to act in order to secure person's data, because it is very easy. It's easy. It may be easier to essentially hack a person. In other words, get them to give you the information to gain access to their code, rather than to try to break in by a technical means. So security awareness extremely important.
Mr. Christian, I want to return to you. When you spoke about the need for an offense by the PR offense by the Banking Association, in the context of this situation of the banking sector in Antigua right now, I mean, it would appear not to be at its strongest point. We had the situation with ABI. Obviously the bank had its problems. It needed to be rescued by the government. We had the Scotia Bank intending to pull out of the country. We had another bank, Canadian bank, recently pull out as well. And from a consumer perspective, we've had customers getting quite frustrated with the increasing charges of using the bank and the different services attached to the bank. How much could this, or things like this, hurt a sector that may already not be at its strongest? And so then how important is the PR offensive to ensure that the banking sector maintains its strength?
No, personally, I don't think it's going to have any significant impact on the banking business or the sector. Because, as I said, we're not going to return to the days where we're keeping money under our mattresses. We're not going to return to the days where 90-95% of the people conducted business in cash. The risks are too high. And even though there are risks associated with the banks, as we have been discussing, it's lower than actually trying to conduct business in cash. So you have to weigh one against the other. Then the whole question of the convenience as well, which you don't have with if you're doing your transactions by cash. So there are a lot of positives for us to continue to build on the platforms that are there for the banking sector. But at the same time, it is important that we maintain or improve consumer confidence. And that's why I suggested earlier, and the other panelists have agreed, that this whole question of education becomes so important. Because at least if you are communicating with your clients, making them aware of the possible vulnerabilities and how to avoid some of these risks, I think you will develop that confidence in those end users, and that will obviously be to the benefit of the institutions. But as I said earlier, I don't think this incident will have any significant impact on the sector. I say it's not the first time it has happened. I remember just a few years ago we had it with First Caribbean, a much larger institution than ACB. It hasn't affected them. It's part of doing business. It's part of the risk that they face every day. But what is important is to be able to get the trust of the clients, and I think that can happen through an educational program or educational engagement.
Rishi, do you agree? I mean, this is just part of the realities of doing business. I mean, you're going to face these things from time to time, and maybe as we go forward in the future, even more so.
Yeah, I think it is part of doing business in this new economy. It's just that even as technology changes, the same old adage of people trying to use nefarious ways to get access to one's money is now changing also. So it's just part of doing business, and most financial institutions would take it in as part of their normal risk management programs that they would adopt during their setup. And it's also part of the insurance that they would probably also take out to cover for certain losses. So it is unfortunately the new reality. I mean, we've seen examples of institutions being hacked all over the world, from Sony to financial institutions in the US and in Europe. So it's no different down here in the Caribbean. It's just that there needs to be a two-way street of communication and education between the financial institutions and their clients to ensure that they all do the best that they can do, proper due diligence, to be able to minimize these risks as much as possible.
Dellan and then Omari, I want to put to you. I mean, we've been talking about the IT infrastructure in terms of developing countries like ours. But where do we need to make our greatest investments to advance our economies? Dellan, you can go first.
Yeah, sure. I would say again, education. This could start with even in school education to business education. I mean, the children of today are the future of tomorrow, and I mean, as these problems grow, they're likely to face in the future. So I believe education from starting with school to businesses would be very, very crucial. As well as growing IT teams within banking infrastructures to develop policies. Policies should be a number one issue for IT banking teams to help combat these issues. And yeah, that should be it for the
Omari, not just to deal with this issue, but to advance our economy. I mean, in terms of that IT development, where should be our biggest focus, where we can kind of reap the benefits of IT developments?
But in terms of IT on the whole, not just security, you mean?
Not just security. Looking at the bigger picture now. We've spoken a lot about security, but I want to get the bigger picture as well.
Well, I think definitely we need to become developers a lot more, and I know there are a lot of persons who are actually pushing that to become developers and not just consumers, to educate persons to actually create apps. Everybody has a mobile device these days, and apps are really taking over. I should say would have taken over. Everybody has a mobile device with many different apps, and we depend on them. I'm sure if you can imagine if you don't have internet, if your internet goes down for about half an hour and you can't access anything on your mobile device or while you're out doing anything, it is a big problem, and it's because we have become so accustomed to using these devices, but we tend to use them a lot to consume content. We have games and different things, but in order for us to build, we need to start selling, and we have to become developers in order to do that.
Everett, Christian, we are just about wrapping up the segment, but I'm going to give you a chance to give your final comments.
My final comments would be along the lines that this incident that caused us to be having this discussion today is rather unfortunate. But it's not something that we will be able to completely eliminate. So the emphasis has to be on minimizing the incidences and the impact on the operations of the banks, and obviously on the part of the account holder, the customers, whose accounts obviously have been impacted by events such as these. But again, we have to just be realistic and recognize that we are not an island unto ourselves. We are part of a global community, a community where a lot of barriers have been broken down and where people can move via the internet, you can say in a seamless manner. That's not going to change. If anything, it's going to get even more so. And so we have to just face the reality, recognize that this is the new economy that we're dealing with, and prepare ourselves to maximize the benefits which are available and to minimize the risk.
Okay, with that, we have come to an end of this segment. So I'll say thank you to former banker Everett Christian, the executive director at Equigov Institute, Rishi Maharaj, information security consultant Omari King, and cybersecurity expert Dellan Morgan. Thank you to all of you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Movement, every Tuesday from 7 p.m. until 8:30 p.m. only on Observer Radio 91.1 FM.
Does your car make a squealing noise and or your brake pedal vibrate when you apply your brakes? Like brake pads, brake rotors don't last forever. Rotors wear and can also become warped. Your brakes are one of the most important features on your car. At Kendall Auto Care Machine Shop, we can resurface your brake rotors without removing them from your car, saving you time and money. Visit us for a free inspection today. Call Kendall Auto Care at 562-1362 or visit us at the Factory Road branch.
Need a change in lifestyle? Thinking about keeping fit and staying healthy? Tune in to Healthy Living on Observer Radio 91.1 FM. Healthy Living, your health, your life.
The United Nations General Assembly, along with the governments of Antigua and Barbuda and Norway, presents Play It Out to Phase It Out, the international star-studded concert to help beat plastic pollution. Featuring our headlining act from Trinidad and Tobago, the Soca King, Rochelle Montano. Alongside supporting international acts, Bomba Estéreo from Colombia, Rocky Douni from Ghana, Norwegian R&B duo Nico and Vince. DJ Robin Schulz from Germany, indie rock band St. Lucia from New York, Grammy award-winning singer and actress Ashanti. And it's hosted by Megan Good. June 1st at the Sir Vivian Richards Stadium. Doors open at 4 p.m. and admission is absolutely free. Don't miss the biggest concert ever to be hosted in Antigua. Be a part of this great initiative and let us play it out to phase it out. Let us beat plastic pollution.
This is Observer Radio.
leak of the CSEC mathematics examination papers, which was shared on social media, Information Minister Melford Nicholas warned that if the issue is not rectified properly, CXC's global reputation could take a major hit.
The CXC, over its life, has achieved a certain degree of acceptance as an entry point for universities across the globe. And so this particular issue is troublesome in the sense that if we do not handle it correctly, when I say we, I mean the collective we from across CARICOM, it could do some harm to the reputation of the CXC process itself. So they've got to deal with that.
Well, the news regarding the leak led to a petition for a resit of the CSEC math exam, which attracted thousands of signatures. Nicholas said that if the step is required to protect CXC's credibility, then it's one solution that CXC should consider.
And whatever they make a determination in terms of the outcome, and if part of the curing system means that the exam would have to be redone, then I guess we're all going to have to address our minds to it. But I don't think at this stage that we could, prognosticate that we will have to await the engagement. And I think they have to consider all those issues, as well as the whole question of parity for the other students who would not have had the open book.
So could this incident really harm the reputation of the Caribbean Examinations Council? What impact would that have for us in the region? And how does CXC uphold its reputation moving forward? Well, joining us to discuss this and more, we have with us today President of the Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association, Lindy Dudhai. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. Good afternoon to you and to your radio staff.
We will have former senior manager at the Caribbean Examinations Council with responsibility for syllabus and curriculum development, and currently the lead consultant at education consulting firm Howard Campbell Associates, Mr. Howard Campbell. Good afternoon. Okay, will be joining us shortly. We have with us former Education Minister Jackie Quinn. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And in studio with us is President of the Antiguan Barbuda Teachers Union, Ashworth Azio. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you and the other members of the panel.
Well, Ashworth, let me start with you. How important is the reputation and credibility of CXC to us in the region?
Well, absolutely important. I think Minister Nicholas in his post-cabinet briefing would have said it quite nicely that CXC represents for our school leavers, an important entryway into universities and colleges in the region and throughout the world. And so therefore the issues of security and quality assurance, if we aren't able to ensure that those are truly in place and that those are protected, then clearly the amount of weight that the university places on the quality of the passes that our students receive would certainly be called into question. And so this breach represents a significant challenge to the reputation of CXC and its security measures that are currently in place.
Well, Lindy, I put the same question to you. Just how important is the reputation and credibility of CXC to us in the region? Mr. Dudai?
Hello?
Hi.
Hello?
Just how important is the reputation and credibility of CXC to us in the region?
I think it's very, very important to us in Caribbean, but while I say that, but I want to also say that this incident took place in Trinidad, right? So what suit of CXC, like the idea is, issue with these invigilators for examination that adhering to the policy guidelines respecting supervision of the CXC examination. So I do not think that CXC could be blamed for what took place in Trinidad. The Ministry of Education in Trinidad is Howard and is not compensating these persons to invigilate the examinations. And obviously something went wrong there. And while CXC will not have to deal with this issue, I do not think that CXC can be blamed for what took place in Trinidad today.
Well, Ms. Quinn, let me put the same question to you on the importance of the reputation and credibility of CXC to us.
Well, I think CXC is the examining body. Even though the Ministry of Education in Trinidad and Tobago would take culpability in terms of what happened with the invigilators, CXC is a 47-year-old institution which has evolved into a highly reputable examining body. And they have had a major hit to their reputation and integrity. And so I think that in order to maintain and certainly to rectify what has gone awry, they would have to say to the world and to the region that the high standards that they have set in terms of exam preparation and administration and so on, they are going to do something about it. And I expect that CXC will do everything in its power to maintain those very high standards that they have set over the last 47 years.
Okay, Ashworth, let me come back to you. What would it mean for students, teachers, parents if a reset of the CXC map was to be granted?
I think when we consider possible reset, it may be us jumping too quickly to what is not yet determined to be the best solution. Clearly, we would have to consider whether or not, or certainly we'll have to consider the extent of the breach that took place. So you would want to know whether or not the students who were involved had the opportunity to share only with those within that center. Then you would want to also consider, okay, if went beyond that center, were there other centers in Trinidad and Tobago who were able to benefit, students in other centers who were able to benefit from this information which the students had regarding the exam, and then whether or not there were persons outside of Trinidad and Tobago who were able to benefit. I think when you begin to talk about the breach having such a ripple effect that it would have left the shores of Trinidad and Tobago, then certainly you'd probably have to consider a full reset. But certainly at this juncture, I believe that once the investigation is done, it may end up being a case where only students in that particular center whose results may be bad and may be forced to rewrite an exam. But clearly, for any student who has such a deep fear of mathematics, they would be relieved that the mathematics exam would have come and certainly passed. And I know that there were many students who left that exam this year very heartbroken because they thought the difficulty level was so great. So you can imagine the deep psychological impact that will have on students who would have considered that exam to be done and over with, having to be faced with the possibility of a resit. So I know certainly in the minds of many students that they're hoping that it won't come to a full resit of that exam. And so I suspect, even without trying to preempt the conclusion of the CXC investigation, that it may end up being a case where the particular center, students from that center, results may be bad and may be forced to resit that exam.
Mr. Campbell, are you with us now? Okay, I'm going to come to you in a second, but let me ask Lindley here. We have a petition to reset the CXC maps. We also have a petition that has come up to let's not reset CXC maps. Currently, right now, the petition to reset it has quite a few more signatures than the one to not reset it. But what do you make of these petitions, and how serious do you think the breach is to lead to these sort of petitions?
Well, I am aware of a petition that was submitted in Trinidad and Tobago calling for a resit of the examination. I think the petition would have gathered thousands of votes. However, as far as my association is concerned, the issue of a resit does not arise, because a resit would arise if there was a leakage of the examination paper, which did not take place in this instance, if the paper was disseminated to other centers and persons who had an unfair advantage in terms of receiving those telephone images that were sent. However, what happened in Trinidad and Tobago was that in a particular center, there was a breakdown in terms of the protocols for supervision of the examination. And the other students who were sitting in the examination in Trinidad and Tobago nowhere benefited from what was sent out, because they were not in possession of any telephone devices for them to receive what was sent out. So it was only one particular center, one particular school in Port of Spain in Trinidad that you had this breakdown in the protocols for the supervision of the examination. So as far as we are concerned in Trinidad, as my union, there is no basis for any resit. In some quarters, it was felt that the degree of the complexity of the examination should warrant a resit, but that has never been a reason for a resit. So the only reason for a resit would have been a leakage of the paper that would have given some an unfair advantage. And while there was some leakage of the paper in terms of screenshots being taken of the examination paper and being disseminated. That dissemination did not reach to the other students who were sitting the examination simultaneously with that particular school in concentration.
Well, Howard, it's not just about this incident that affects the reputation and the credibility of the CXC. That's a broader issue. So, what issues do affect the reputation and credibility of CXC that we need to be aware of and that we need to ensure that we keep on top of?
Well, I would say how CXC handles this issue going forward will determine if their reputation and credibility will be affected. And CXC has policies in place to deal with instances like these. I have been in contact with the registrar of CXC, Mr. Maharaj, and he has assured me that they are awaiting a report from the Ministry of Education in Port of Spain. When that happens, there is a technical advisory committee of CXC that deals with incidents like these, and the committee will look at the report and they will deliberate on the report, and then they will make a recommendation to the final awards committee of CXC with respect to what should be done in this particular instance. And of course, there are a number of options that may be put forward by the technical advisory committee. One being for those particular students in that school to receive the examination, for the students to be disqualified for that particular examination is another option. Right, but the technical advisory committee of CXC will have to look at what report is sent by the Ministry of Education candidate, and then the submit its recommendation to the final awards committee of CXC.
Howard Campbell, I wanted to put that question to you on the broader issue of CXC's reputation and its credibility. What factors do we need to consider, and what do we need to do to ensure that we maintain, the highest reputation and the greatest credibility of the Caribbean Examinations Council for the benefit of us all in the region?
Well, first of all, the underlying mission of CXC is to provide persons within the region with valid and reliable exams, but more importantly, certificates of international repute. Now, for them to do this, they have to first of all ensure that the test instruments that they prepare and administer are first of all valid, that these test instruments are administered in a secure environment in a manner that is fair to all of the candidates, and then at the tail end, that each of these exam scripts are reliably marked and a grade awarded that is commensurate with the work that each candidate would have done. It's important for us to remember that the unit of certification is per subject or per syllabus at the candidate level. So we should not be hasty to look at necessarily what is now being called a breach and talking about a reset with tens of thousands of candidates if it is that the situation is one that is seemingly localized. As it relates to the what it is.
Go on, Mr. Campbell. We're listening. Lindsley, I think we're just hearing some chatter coming from your line there.
Oh yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, sorry.
Alright, so in relation to what it is that the council ought to be doing to maintain its credibility, and in your introduction you spoke about, you played a clip that indicated that CXC does have a certain high level of credibility now within the marketplace, and I would suggest that there could be a three-step approach to maintaining this credibility. For starters, they could continue to fine-tune the processes that they now have in order to deal with evolving threats. What we saw, or what we've been hearing being reported, I would not regard as a breach, but simply a case of exam fraud that would have taken place within a localized test center. And the CXC Act and how it is that CXC operates clearly separates these kinds of test center incidents from what would be regarded as a full breach which would have taken place before the administration of the exam. So the policies and procedures that are in place are very precise. They would have been decided and agreed on by members of council. And council in this instance, we were talking about the Caribbean Examinations Council, has representatives from members of the Ministries of Education and the teaching profession from all participating territories. So for starters then, council will need to ensure that they keep up to date with all the emerging threats. And in this particular case, talking about access to mobile devices, high-speed internet access, cameras that can take high-resolution images. Secondly, if it is that the general populace and the key stakeholders are aware that CXC has the policies and the systems in-house to deal with these kinds of things, then it is likely that persons will trust the examining body when they say that they are in contact with the local Ministry of Education, the breach is being investigated, and they will take the necessary corrective action. One thing that they could do further to this is to ensure that their own quality management systems and standards are certified by an international body. So we do know that the systems that are in-house can stand up to scrutiny. And the final recommendation would be that they just communicate effectively with all key stakeholders. In my own mind, a press release on the day or the day after the incident occurred would not suffice. There would need to be some follow-up statement in the days that are ensuing, so people can rest assured that the matter is really getting the kind of attention that it needs. So communication will be that third and very critical plank of that credibility, to ensure credibility going forward.
Ms. Quinton, looking at the broader picture, what role does CXC play in ensuring that we can hold our heads high as having a second to none education system and examination systems in the Caribbean, that when we go anywhere in the world with our qualifications, with our educational background in the Caribbean, that we can hold our heads high? And not only what role does it play, but where can it do better, if at all?
Has such a good reputation all across the world. When CXC would have replaced the Cambridge GCE exams some 47 years ago, it was a fledgling institution. Now that it has evolved into this highly reputable examining body, it needs to look at how it can continue to secure the integrity and the credibility of the institution. And I want to say, Rory, that I did see the video, and I am appalled that such a significant breach, and I heard one of my fellow panelists refer to it as examination fraud. But whether we call it a breach or a fraud, it is something that is undermining the credibility of CXC, because invigilators in any exam, whether it's SATs or GCEs or CXCs, they are duty bound to maintain proper conduct in an exam, in strict adherence to the high standards which CXC would have set, and the kind of regulations that we would have put in place for the final certification of each student. So on no account should they be leaving the room or allowing open textbooks or smartphones into the room. And I heard one of the fellow panelists talk about the fact that other centers would have been doing their exam at the same time as that school in Trinidad, the Tranquility Secondary School. But if you recall, Jamaica and Belize would have been an hour behind. So the students in Jamaica and Belize would not have started their exams yet. So we are not sure, based on what has been put out by CXC, what has been put out on social media, we are not sure how far and wide this breach may have been or this fraud may have gone. We are not sure if material was sent to Jamaica or to Belize. So the investigation is going to be very necessary if CXC is going to protect its integrity and credibility. I keep using those words because CXC has been known to have very high standards. And so I am sort of leaning towards the first petition, Rory, that in the interest of fairness and justice, all students should be doing a supplemental. And I've heard lots of other remedies being forwarded, being discussed. A resit or a supplemental for that particular school, Tranquility Secondary in Trinidad, or marking on the curve across the board, or disqualifying all those students involved. And I've heard about this, the supplemental for all students across the region. And I think that CXC has to get nimble. They have to be very decisive in ensuring that the relevant security and supervisory measures are in place if they're going to go forward with a supplemental or a resit across the region to avoid any breaches. That, I think, would help to repair CXC's badly damaged credibility. And also, it will give our students a better shot at the paper. Because you haven't talked about the fact, Rory, that paper 2, many students across Antigua and Barbuda and across the region were complaining that there were aspects of that paper that could have been a Cape A level exam, the difficulty of that paper, and some items which seem to have come from a Cape or an advanced paper.
Ashraf, I want to touch on the relationship between CXC, the teachers, and the ministry. But before I do that, I want your take on the remarks of Ms. Quinn just now.
Certainly, and I think it goes back to what I was saying a while ago. Paper 2 was a harrowing experience for even the very best of our math students at a secondary school, and the sentiment there was certainly, listen, this had to have been something from a higher level, elements within that, which increased significantly the difficulty level for even our very best math students. But again, I am not certain that I can bring down the gavel on any one of the proposed solutions to this particular problem, because our effort to bring remedy by perhaps allowing a regional reset of that exam may also place other students in a disadvantageous position as well. So we have to consider that. At the end of the day, however, CXC must do something which is in the benefit of all. We can't satisfy us all, but certainly we'd have to do something that is in the benefit of the vast majority of our students. And so I think that having determined the extent, again, we can't rush to judgment. We must determine through proper investigation the extent to which that breach might have been able to affect overall or compromise the regional integrity of that particular paper and CXC as an institution. Then we may have to look towards a full reset.
Howard, you have a history working in curriculum development. How do you get a situation where somebody complains that, several students complain
more than several.
that one exam is so much harder than previous exams? I mean, shouldn't there be a standard level there across the years?
The standard level across the years, yes, as it relates to examining the same curriculum. Please note that the math curriculum or the math syllabus that was examined this year would have been examined, I believe, for the second time, only the second time, as it was examined for the first time during the 2018 cycle. We do have a history of teachers across the region and students also preparing for exams solely on the basis of the use of past papers. I myself have conducted teacher training events across the Caribbean, and when you ask the teachers if it is that they have read the rationale, which appears on page 1 of each and every one of the syllabuses offered by CXC, the answer in the main is no. As a matter of fact, over the past year, I have done just about 12 such events, and I have been collecting the data as it relates to who it is that have read the rationale. And on average, we're talking about 2 or 3 out of 50 to 55 teachers. Here's what this means. It means that a syllabus that would have been produced by CXC and sanctioned by the school's examinations committee and put out for use for exams would not be fully read nor understood by the stakeholders. Their only focus is on content. Little or no attention is paid to the nature of how the content is going to be assessed or the nuances with some of the objectives. So what you have happening at the end of the day is that a question or questions didn't come how people expected them to come. They look different. And immediately there are these claims that the paper is harder or that has items that are invalid.
Lindsley, I'm going to give you a chance to respond to what was said before. But on that question, then, are teachers failing then to properly embrace the curriculum and the syllabus, and that lead into this situation where students are complaining that the exam is just too hard?
Well,
to Lindsley here.
Yes, I'm hearing you. Yes. I would not say that is the reason for the examination being perceived by some as being difficult. In different years, you have different reactions coming out of the paper, and I think that maybe the preparation this time around may not have been in sync with what the paper 2 of the mathematics paper would have demanded in terms of skills being required of the students this week. So you have this from year to year, and in some years you have that complaint of the examination paper being more difficult. In fact, this year, for our primary leaving examination, the SCA examination, there was a similar concern about the paper being more difficult. And that paper is also set by the CXC. So I would not want to categorically say it's the fault of the teachers in terms of not preparing the students properly, but there may be other issues that may be involved for such a comment being made this time around to this paper being more difficult.
Ashworth, I'm going to ask you, and then I'm going to come to Ms. Quinn on the same question. Sorry, Ms. Quinn, did you want to jump in on that point before I move on? Okay,
yes,
we'll go on now then.
I want to say that, I have spoken to a few students about the difficulty of the paper, and they confirm, and I have to admit that the students I spoke to were high flyers. These were high-flying students who were looking for distinction. And they confirmed that there were 3 or so items which presented some difficulty for them. Question 4, question 7, and question 8. These were questions having to do with sequencing and quantity and equation, which appeared to have been more geared to the CAPE A-level math. One student said to me that she took quite a long time to complete the paper as it became progressively difficult. So she had a problem with her time management and she was unable to complete the paper. But having talked to the CXC, the local CXC registrar here, Mr. Myrick Smith, and his discussions with some of the leading mathematicians here, he said to me, a single item with 2 marks or with 5 marks is not going to significantly throw off a student or fail a student. And we also have to notice, Rory, that 2 years ago, CXC introduced school-based assessment for the math program. So now children can go into the exam with 20% of their final grade. I noticed that in paper 1, which is the multiple choice, which is 30% of the mark, have heard no complaints about that paper one. In fact, one of the students said to me, she thinks that she would have gotten 27 to 28% out of that paper one. So, I mean, we have to look at it holistically and see whether or not there were some items which could be eliminated in the marking, whether CXC would look at those items to see whether they slipped in from some advanced level paper. But I was very careful, Rory, to ask those students whether they would be in favor of a resit of paper two. And one of them said right out to me, no, the innocent should not have to suffer for the guilty. I'm happy with what I've done. I didn't do well on those two questions. And the other student said she was quite ambivalent. She said she wouldn't mind one way or the other because it would give her a better shot at a distinction in math.
I mean, I guess there is that issue that, I mean, exams are quite stressful, and I mean, if you have to go through that whole process again,
yes, it can have the reverse impact, yeah. But I just wanted to, I noted that Howard mentioned the issue of the syllabus, and this is where I've always had an issue. I recall in regional discussions at the level of the Caribbean Union of Teachers, along with CXC, it is one of the complaints we have brought to their attention that there are times when CXC introduces, for example, a new examination. Let's take, for instance, the CSLEC, what we call the competency examination for the students who considered to be most likely to be at risk of perhaps falling out of school or whatever it is, developing some competencies earlier on. That exam, like the basic exam, was never sold properly, and so it began to lose its significance as quickly as it came in.
Yeah.
Similarly, you have a change in syllabus, and you've not taken the opportunity to properly orient persons to this particular syllabus, and then you suggest somehow that they're not handling it well. I think beyond CXC being that examination body, setting exam papers and overseeing that particular process, you'd want to ensure as well that the preparation for that particular exam is handled in such a manner that it gives everyone the very best possible chance of proving that they have mastered the content and that they're able to face without much concern the exam that will be placed in front of them. So there is that twofold issue. Yes, teachers, in engaging with the syllabus, they must ensure that they are fully aware of the objectives and so forth of that particular content area. But more importantly, that the examining body who's administering that exam must ensure that all of the stakeholders, including the teachers who are preparing the students, are adequately schooled on the content of that, and as well as the overall objective of the particular exam and content area as well.
You see, this brings me to the question, because in order for CXC to work, in order for education systems to work, we need to have a great working relationship between CXC, the Ministries of Education, and the teachers. We know we have points of dispute, because I don't know if it's resolved now, but I know that issue with the SBAs and the payment over the market of the SBAs and all of that. That was an issue of contention out there as well.
It still is, really.
Okay, so there are these points of contention. Is the relationship between the ministries, the teachers, and CXC working as well as it can?
I think that the construct of council, for example, it's good, such that you have representatives from the Ministry of Education, you have representatives from the teaching fraternity, albeit in most instances it may be the principal who's representing the teaching corps, as well as representatives from CXC as well. And so those dialogue, yes, they're taking place, and they are supposed to be taking into consideration all of the concerns of the various stakeholders through the region. However, I believe that on a broader level, there are some issues with the organ called CXC and how it interacts generally with stakeholders, in particular teachers. As I've said before, CXC is an organization that has proven itself to be an excellent examination body, excellent board, with one of very high repute. But here's a situation, for example, throughout the region, there's growing concern that CXC has been engaging in unfair practices. And let me explain what I mean. So on an annual basis, CXC provides an exam. It pays teachers to mark those scripts. It pays invigilators, whether it be CXC regional or local. An invigilator or invigilators are paid to oversee the examination. And yet teachers are saying to you that the process of administering SEs can be quite arduous. In fact, it can be quite stressful on a teacher, especially when you're looking at a situation where you have 40 students and you're preparing and marking and editing and giving back. And in some instances, you're running down students to get them to complete their SBAs. So the teachers involved in all of that, and yet there is no recognition that it represents for them added work, added stress, albeit by an organization that does not employ them. And so that level of discussion has to take place at the regional level. CXC must take into consideration that this is a real issue that will have to be spoken of and that where a solution will have to be found. Otherwise, we will continue to have the sort of dysfunction that we've seen, where teachers in Barbados, for example, are determining that they will no longer mark SBAs until they can have some reasonable discussion about compensation, where teachers in Grenada are saying they're no longer willing to mark SBAs unless there's a reasonable discussion about compensation. The teachers in Trinidad and Tobago are saying that they're no longer willing to mark SBAs unless there's a reasonable discussion about compensation. And only this week, in our general conference, there was a strong resolution, a very strong binding resolution to make a move towards getting that on the agenda of the Ministry of Education and of the local CXC office to ensure that we can come to the table and discuss the possibility of teachers being compensated for marking SBs. So those are some issues that we have to figure out. So at this point, the relationship is not very comfy, cozy at all.
Howard, on that relationship between the teachers, the CXC, and the education ministries, where do you see, apart from just the SBA issue, where do you see the points that could be improved, and how do we do that?
Well, each participating country is supposed to have a CXC national committee that should have full oversight of all that is happening in the country as it relates to the exam products and services offered by CXC, and if there are issues that need to be addressed at the regional level, then certainly these national committees can put these forward. The CXC Act, which establishes exactly how it is that CXC ought to operate, clearly and squarely establishes that the Schools Examinations Committee is the body that advises the council on all matters related to exams. So as it relates to the matter of payments for SBAs, I do believe that if national committees and through representation of whether it is the chief education officers or the permanent secretaries, many of whom actually form council, if these persons decide to treat with the issue, then the issue is going to be treated with.
Lindsley, are you satisfied with the relationship? If not, how can it be improved?
Well, we are not satisfied with the relationship because we have raised concerns with our representatives in Trinidad, and they have gone to the council meetings, and those issues have not seen any traction in terms of resolution to the problems. And the main one I'm actually speaking to a short while ago is the issue of compensation for SBAs. And that has been an issue for many years now, I would say over a decade, and it continues to be an issue. And I would have thought that something as serious as that issue, something as important as that issue, should have been dealt with already. I have spoken to CSC functionaries who have told me that they didn't say they were willing to pay teachers to the marking of SBAs. However, they've been told by the regional representative that they cannot do that because they would be altering terms and conditions of teachers in the individual country. So, the whole issue of payment for marking of SBAs is an ongoing issue. We are not satisfied with it. So much so that in San Diego, we have taken the matter to court, and we have a date set for trial to this particular issue, which is July 29th of this year. We expect that by September, a decision will be given to set this matter whether teachers should be marking
Ms. Quinn, how do we improve that relationship between not only the teachers and the CXC, but also with the ministries of education?
Yes, I am, Rory, I am really shocked that this kind of discussion is still going on because the remuneration for teachers who mark SBAs, and the SBA process is a very intense process, very complicated process. It requires a lot of supervision and inputs by the teachers. I'm surprised that this is continuing because CXC has to understand that all the players, all the stakeholders, the teachers, the writers of the curricula, the teachers who are actually marking papers, every player in this certification process, they have to be paid. Why are we still having this discussion so much so that one territory is taking this matter to court? CXC has to understand that the SBA is now a critical part of the certification and the examination process, and they should be paying all of these players who are contributing. I wanted to also say, Rory, that the relationship cannot improve if there is an adversarial relationship going on between teachers who are critical to the process and CXC. You have to make sure that everybody is comfortable with this process. And I gather that even here in Antigua and Barbuda, some invigilators, now I'm not talking about the people who mark SBAs, invigilators from last year have not been paid. I mean, how do you have a credible situation, a good relationship with the people who are upholding the integrity of your institution if you haven't paid them from last year and you expect them this year to give the same high quality service? I mean, we've got to do better than this. 47 years in the examining process, CXC really has to pull up its socks where this is concerned.
And to add to that, Rory, I certainly don't think that this is a case where you can separate what happens at the local level from CXC regional body, because it is by extension CXC, and any irregularities even at the local level is sure to compromise the overall integrity and image of CXC as a regional organization or entity.
Howard, evidently through this discussion, there's come out that there's points other than this incident with the math exam that could affect the credibility, the reputation of CXC. What is your recommendations on moving forward? Howard?
Oh, sorry, I didn't notice that was mine.
Sure.
The greater communication amongst all the stakeholders. My colleague panelists now just spoke to the issue of overdue payments for invigilation. To the best of my certain knowledge, something like this is handled at the local level.
Yes,
and
it's handled by the
find
Ministry of
issues
Education.
like this being blamed on the CXC's secretariat. CXC will pay based on arrangement for script marking. This is something that is usually fully dispensed of within a couple of days. I myself have been a marker for CXC as well as another international examining body, and in both of the situations, the situation is the same. You agree to mark a certain number of scripts, you do get paid. So we do have a lot of misinformation going around. CXC as the secretariat, who is the set of administrative professionals, they work within set guidelines that is put in place by council. So CXC as a council needs to ensure that each of the stakeholders, and now we're talking about the ministries, the schools that submit candidates, the parents, the test takers, and the employers, individually and collectively understand how the examining process works, and also that each player has a critical role in ensuring that the organization and the certification process happens how it ought to happen. CXC is a CARICOM organ. It is ours, each and every CARICOM national. We must individually and collectively play our parts to ensure that it works.
Okay, well, thank you there, Howard. We have just about run out of time, but Ashwa, if you want to
I know we're
reply
running out of
quickly.
time, but I just wanted to reiterate again, as Howard is speaking, that any inefficiencies, even at the local level, because we surely understand the relationship between what happens at the local level and what happens at the regional level, but any inefficiencies at the local level will have a direct impact on the reputation of the regional entity known as CXC, and I think that is the point I was making. And I know that this may be a point for future discussion, Rory, but I think that the breach which we saw in Trinidad and Tobago this year, it raised for me some added concerns about the potential for moving CXC exams online, especially where you have territories without adequate infrastructure and you're now considering students bring their own devices. How does that in itself filter into CXC's ability to maintain the integrity of its examination process? But I certainly think that opens the door for future discussions and
certainly a discussion for another day there. But we have run out of time, so I say thank you to all of you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Well, it's that time. Thank you. It's that time when we would have heard something in the week that we think deserves a second hearing. Our clip this week comes following the tragic death of a young woman in an alleged domestic dispute. Social Transformation Minister Samantha Marshall says police will be given more power to intervene and remove victims from abusive relationships.
We find that sometimes the police are, for whatever reason, not willing to exercise that. And I mean, the Directorate of Gender Affairs is willing to work along with the police. We have always worked along with them to the point that we have the Special Victims Unit now at the Directorate of Gender Affairs. And we want to work along with them some more on training in that regard, to encourage training and to encourage the police to exercise that power that they have. Because it could, not saying that it will always, but it could in some instances save unfortunate situations like what we had yesterday from happening.
A senior opposition member hints at disquiet while a former one touts an alliance. We ask, could personal ambitions shape political compromise? Customers lose thousands of dollars in an alleged bank hack. We ask, will this be a painful blow to faith in the banking sector? And thousands petition for a reset of CXC maps. We ask, is the credibility of the region's education body at risk? These were the big stories of the week that was, that were today's big issues.
Does your car make a squealing noise and or your brake pedal vibrate when you apply your brakes? Like brake pads, brake rotors don't last.